My millionaire grandma leaned back in the booth at Salt Creek Grill, sipping her iced tea, and casually asked me, "So, Daniel, enjoying the $8,000 a month?" I froze. What $8,000? My dad's face went pale, and my older brother nearly dropped his fork. The chatter in the restaurant faded into the background, and I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I had no idea what she was talking about. $8,000 a month? If I had that kind of money, I wouldn't have been working double shifts at the diner last summer or begging my landlord for an extension on rent. My hands tightened around the fork, and I forced a laugh, thinking maybe she was joking. But she wasn't. Her eyes stayed locked on me, waiting for an answer. My grandma, Eleanor, has always been a little intimidating. She's the kind of woman who commands a room without raising her voice. She owns more rental properties than I can count, drives a car worth more than my entire college tuition, and somehow manages to make everyone around her feel small without even trying. Still, she's always been fair. Every year on my birthday, she sent me a crisp card with a check, sometimes $50, sometimes $100. It was never much, but it was always consistent, and I appreciated it. She never gave anyone more than that, at least not that I knew of. Growing up, things weren't easy. My dad, Martin, liked to act like he had everything under control, but money was always tight. He'd tell me to get a job when I asked for help with textbooks. When my car broke down, he told me to man up and figure it out on my own. I worked late shifts at a diner, studied whenever I could, and scraped by. My older brother, Cliff, always seemed to have more than me. He had a better car, nicer clothes, and somehow always had cash to go out with friends, even though he wasn't working nearly as much as I was. That night at Salt Creek Grill, the pieces started to feel like they were moving, but I couldn't put them together yet. My grandma leaned back in her chair, narrowing her eyes at my silence. "Don't tell me you've already blown through it," she said with a half smile. I shook my head. "Grandma, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen a dime of that money." The color drained from my dad's face so fast I thought he might faint. He stammered, reaching for his glass of water, while Cliff shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Neither of them said a word, and the silence at our table grew heavier than the clinking silverware around us. For a moment, Eleanor just stared, her expression unreadable. Then her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well," she finally said, setting her glass down with a quiet thud, "that's interesting." And right then I knew something was very, very wrong. I looked straight at my grandma and said quietly, "I never got that money." My voice shook a little, but I meant every word. She raised her eyebrows like she thought I was joking. Then she told me she'd been wiring the money every month into a trust account, and my dad had been the one helping her with the setup. The air at the table turned heavy. My dad coughed into his napkin, avoiding my eyes. "It's complicated," he muttered, like that explained everything. His face stayed red, and I could see sweat starting to form at his hairline. Cliff jumped in quickly, trying to change the subject. "Grandma, maybe Daniel just forgot or didn't notice it. He's not always good with numbers." He forced a laugh that didn't land. My stomach twisted. I knew every dollar in my bank account. I never had enough money not to notice. Something was off, and they both knew it. Grandma leaned back and stared at my dad. Her expression shifted from confusion to something sharper, like she was piecing things together in her head. She didn't raise her voice, but the silence around her felt louder than if she had. I could see my dad's hands trembling as he cut into his steak, even though he wasn't eating it. Cliff avoided looking at me altogether, fiddling with his phone under the table. None of it made sense. If there really was a trust account, why had I spent the past year struggling to pay for gas and ramen noodles? Why had I worked every weekend when apparently thousands of dollars were supposed to be sitting there for me? Grandma finally set down her fork and folded her hands. "That money was supposed to give you a start, Daniel. I wanted you to focus on your future, not worry about bills." Her voice was calm, but I could feel her growing doubt. She glanced at my dad again, as if demanding an explanation without saying the words. Dad forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There's paperwork, forms. You know how these things go. The bank doesn't make it easy." He spoke too fast, tripping over his words. I'd never heard him sound so unsure of himself. Every part of me screamed that I was being lied to. The pit in my stomach grew heavier, like a stone pressing down. Grandma's face hardened as the silence stretched on. She wasn't buying his excuses any more than I was. She turned her gaze back to me and said, "We'll look into it." Her tone carried weight, a promise that she wasn't letting this drop. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Cliff kept pretending to scroll through his phone. I didn't have proof yet, but I could feel the truth pressing against the edges of that moment. Something had been hidden from me, and I wasn't going to let it slide. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning in circles. The more I tried to push the dinner conversation aside, the louder it grew in my head. $8,000 every month. It was impossible to forget. If it was true, then where had it gone? Sleep wouldn't come, so I grabbed my laptop and logged into every account I had. Checking balances had always been depressing, but this time I studied every statement, every transfer. Nothing. No surprise deposits, no savings tucked away, just the same meager numbers I'd been scraping by on. The glow of the screen lit up my room, and I remembered all the times I had begged for just a little help. My car had broken down halfway through senior year, and I needed a few hundred to fix it. Dad shook his head and said there wasn't anything to spare. I ended up walking to campus for weeks until I could save enough from tips. Another time, I didn't have enough for textbooks. I asked again, and he told me to figure it out like a man. I picked up more hours at the diner, working late into the night and falling asleep in class the next morning. I thought back to Cliff, always showing up in clean sneakers, buying drinks for his friends, never worrying about how to pay for gas. I never questioned it back then, but now those memories tasted bitter. My hands tightened into fists as I thought of the nights I dragged myself home exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open, while money that should have been mine was supposed to be waiting somewhere. The betrayal cut deeper the more I thought about it. If what Grandma said was true, then my dad hadn't just lied. He had chosen to watch me struggle while pretending nothing could be done. I kept replaying his face at dinner, the way he couldn't look me in the eye, the way his words stumbled. My chest ached with anger, but also with a strange sadness I couldn't shake. I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time. If I accused him without proof, he'd find a way to twist it. Cliff would back him up, and I'd be the one looking crazy. I needed something solid. Grandma had mentioned transfers. That meant there had to be records, receipts, something showing where the money had gone. The idea of going to her directly made me nervous. She wasn't the type to entertain baseless claims, but she was sharp enough to recognize when someone was lying. If she saw what I saw, that I had nothing, then maybe she'd understand. I grabbed my phone and drafted a short message, asking if she could send me the details of those deposits. I hesitated before hitting send, wondering if this would only make things worse. But deep down, I already knew. The truth was the only way forward. I pressed send and sat back, my heart pounding. One way or another, I was going to find out what had really happened. Grandma didn't take long to reply. The next morning, she called me and asked me to come by her place. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness underneath it that made me sit up straight. When I arrived, she was already waiting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers spread out neatly in front of her. Without wasting words, she slid the documents toward me. My hands shook a little as I picked them up. They weren't just receipts, they were full statements from the bank. Month after month, a deposit of $8,000 sat there in black and white. The account had my name attached, my social security number, even my birth date. Everything confirmed that the money was meant for me. The part that made my stomach twist was a single line printed under custodian. My dad's name was right there. It felt like the ground shifted under me. My father had been in control of the account the whole time. He wasn't just aware of the money, he had access to it. I stared at the numbers piling up, and all I could think of were the sudden changes in his lifestyle. Last summer, he drove home a brand new truck, claiming he had gotten a great deal from a friend. At the time, I believed him. Now it looked less like a deal and more like theft. And then there was Cliff. Out of nowhere, he had bragged about putting money into some startup idea, even though he barely held down a steady job. I had brushed it off as him exaggerating, but seeing the statements made everything clear. That money had fueled his so-called investment. I felt my throat tighten as I set the papers down. It wasn't some mistake or confusion at the bank. My dad had chosen to take what was mine, and my brother had been enjoying the benefits. They had both watched me scrape together tips and sleepless nights while pretending nothing was wrong. The anger burned hot in my chest, but underneath it was something worse, a deep cut of betrayal I couldn't put into words. Grandma sat quietly across from me, her face unreadable. She didn't have to say anything. The proof was in my hands. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of me flipping through page after page of stolen opportunities. Every deposit was like another reminder of the life I should have had, the struggles I shouldn't have faced. I pushed the stack back toward her and clenched my jaw. There was no doubt anymore. My own family had treated my future like their personal wallet. I thought of the hours I'd worked, the exhaustion, the times I almost gave up, and it all felt like a cruel joke. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt, I was ready to fight back. I chose a crowded place for the meeting, figuring they'd be less likely to cause a scene. Olive Garden was noisy with families and clinking glasses, but my nerves made every sound sharper. I sat at a corner table with the papers tucked inside a folder, my leg bouncing under the table. When my dad and Cliff walked in, they were laughing about something, like it was just another day. Cliff slapped my shoulder when he sat down, while Dad waved for the server. Neither of them had any idea what I was about to bring up. I waited until drinks were set on the table, then pulled out the folder and slid it between us. Dad's smile faltered the second he saw the bank logo. He picked it up slowly, skimming the first page, and I watched his jaw tighten. Cliff leaned over to look, and his smug grin slipped too. "That's my name on those accounts," I said firmly, keeping my voice low but steady. "Every month, $8,000 was sent for me. You two have been spending it." Dad cleared his throat and leaned back, putting on a face like he was still in control. "Daniel, you don't understand. We were protecting it, making sure it didn't get wasted." I shook my head. "Protecting it? You bought yourself a truck, Dad." Cliff dumped money into some gamble he called a business. "Don't insult me by calling that protection." Cliff finally spoke up, his tone sharp. "Let's be real. You wouldn't even know how to handle that kind of money. You'd blow it in a year." His voice was loud enough that the table next to us glanced over. My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. "You mean like the way you handled it? By stealing it from me and pretending I wouldn't notice?" The tension grew thick. Dad leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Watch your tone. We're family. Family doesn't drain accounts meant for each other," I shot back. My hands were clenched so tightly my knuckles hurt, but I forced myself to stay calm. A couple of nearby diners slowed their eating, clearly listening. The clatter of plates around us made the silence at our table stand out even more. Dad tried again, softer this time. "We were just trying to make sure it was safe." I pushed the papers back toward him. "If safe means lying to me and spending money you had no right to touch, then you've succeeded. But don't expect me to stay quiet about it." Cliff muttered something under his breath and shoved his chair back, glaring at me like I had betrayed them. Dad sat frozen, staring at the folder, his face drained of color. For the first time, I didn't feel small in front of them. I wasn't the struggling kid they could brush off anymore. They knew I had the truth, and I wasn't going to let them bury it. I drove straight to Grandma's house after the meeting. My chest was still tight from the argument, but I knew she needed to hear it all. She opened the door before I even knocked twice, her sharp eyes searching my face. I stepped inside and set the folder down on her table. She didn't ask questions at first, just flipped through the pages. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and the deeper she read, the darker her expression grew. When she finally looked up, there was no mistaking the anger in her eyes. "I trusted your father," she said slowly, almost to herself. "I gave him responsibility because I thought he would protect you. Instead, he's been using what was yours." Her hand trembled as she pushed the papers back toward me. Hearing her say it out loud made my stomach twist. I had been holding on to a thin hope that maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed, that there had been some mix-up. But she confirmed what I already knew. She stood from her chair, pacing the length of the room. "All these years, I worried about whether you were eating well, whether you had what you needed. I gave him the tools to help you, and he turned it into his own pocketbook." Her voice cracked for a moment, though she quickly steadied it. When she sat down again, she took my hands in hers. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I had no idea this was happening. If I had known, I never would have let him near a single cent." Her apology hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't the one who betrayed me, but she still carried the guilt. My throat tightened as I tried to answer. "You couldn't have known. He made sure to hide it from both of us." She shook her head firmly. "That ends now. Martin and Cliff won't see another dollar from me. I don't care what excuses they make. They've shown me who they are." I wanted to feel triumphant hearing her say that, but instead there was a heaviness inside me. These were my own father and brother. Cutting them out wasn't just money. It was a wall being built between us forever. Still, as I sat there with Grandma's hands gripping mine, I felt something shift. For once, someone was on my side. Someone believed me without hesitation. That mix of relief and sadness made it hard to breathe, but I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Grandma leaned back, her eyes still blazing. "I'll make sure what's yours reaches you directly from now on. No middlemen. No lies." I nodded, trying to steady myself. The truth was painful, but at least it was out in the open. My dad and brother had chosen their path, and Grandma had chosen hers. All I could do now was accept it. 2 nights later, I heard pounding on my apartment door. The sound was so sharp it rattled the frame. When I peered through the peephole, my stomach sank. My dad and Cliff were standing there. Dad's face was tight with rage, and Cliff was pacing like he was ready to explode. "Open up, Daniel," Dad barked. "We need to talk." I stayed quiet, pressing my back against the wall. Talking was the last thing I wanted. I knew why they were here, and nothing good could come from letting them in. Cliff's voice cut through the hall. "You think you're smart? Turning Grandma against us? You ruined everything." His words were loud enough that the neighbors' doors started to crack open. People peeked out, whispering to each other. I kept the deadbolt locked and called out, "Go home. There's nothing to talk about." My hands shook, but I wasn't going to give them what they wanted. Dad lowered his voice, but the anger was still there. "Do you have any idea what you've done? She's cutting us off because of you. You'll regret this." Cliff slammed his fist against the door, making the wood tremble. "You're not better than us, Daniel. You're nothing without us." His shouting echoed down the hallway, and I saw one of my neighbors shaking her head as she pulled her child back inside. I leaned my forehead against the wall, wishing they would just leave. A part of me wanted to yell back, to throw every bit of hurt in their faces. But another part of me knew it wouldn't change anything. They weren't here to listen, they were here to blame. Eventually, their footsteps faded, and the hallway grew quiet again. I slid down to the floor, the weight of it all pressing on me. My own family had come to my door not with apologies, but with threats. Any hope that they cared about me was gone. The truth settled heavy in my chest. I wasn't losing them. They had never truly been mine to begin with. The only loyalty they had was to themselves and the money they thought they deserved. I realized then that no matter how much it hurt, I had to let go of the idea that we were on the same side. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, listening to the faint sounds of life going on around me. Neighbors laughing, a TV playing somewhere down the hall. For the first time, I felt a strange mix of sadness and freedom. They had shown me who they were, and I finally believed it. My door was still locked, but more importantly, so was my resolve. They could shout, they could blame, they could rage all they wanted. I wasn't opening that door again. Grandma didn't waste time. Within a week, she had her lawyer involved, and every decision she once left to my dad was shifted into my hands. Keys, contracts, and paperwork that had always been kept out of my reach were now passed directly to me. For the first time, I was the one sitting across from bankers and property managers, listening as they explained numbers and plans meant for the future. My dad's name disappeared from everything, and it felt like a door closing for good. She also created a new account, this time in my name alone. No guardians, no middle steps, no loopholes for someone else to control. The money went straight where it was supposed to, and the relief that came with it was like a weight lifting from my shoulders. I didn't need to wonder if it would be taken again. It was safe. Meanwhile, whispers started reaching me. I wasn't asking for updates, but small-town talk has a way of spreading. Dad's new truck, the one he liked to show off, was repossessed after missed payments. Neighbors mentioned how the lights at his place had been cut off twice in 1 month. The man who once told me to figure it out was now facing calls from creditors every day. Cliff wasn't doing any better. The big project he bragged about investing in had crumbled. Someone told me he was begging old friends to loan him money to cover what he had lost. Every time I heard a detail, I felt a twist in my stomach. Not quite joy, but not sorrow either. It was justice, happening without me lifting a finger. I didn't post about it online. I didn't brag to anyone. I simply carried on with my new responsibilities, showing up to meetings, signing documents, and learning how to handle what Grandma had trusted me with. The contrast was clear. While they were falling apart, I was quietly building something stable. One evening I passed Cliff in the grocery store. He avoided my eyes, pretending to study a row of cereal boxes. His clothes looked worn, and for the first time, he didn't have that smug grin. I walked past without saying a word. There was nothing left to explain between us. Revenge didn't come in shouting matches or slammed doors. It came in silence, in steady change. The same money they once stole to live large was now out of their reach forever. They had played their hand, and it left them empty. At night, when I locked my apartment door, I thought about how different things felt. I wasn't celebrating their downfall, but I couldn't deny the sense of balance. They chose greed, and it caught up with them. I chose patience, and it paid off. In the end, the sweetest part was knowing I didn't need to destroy them. They had done it to themselves. Thanksgiving came, and Grandma insisted on hosting the entire family at her house. Her dining room was packed, uncles, aunts, cousins, all squeezed around the long table covered with food. The air smelled of roasted turkey and pies, but I could barely taste anything. I had a feeling why she had asked me to be there, and my chest tightened with nerves. After the plates were filled and conversations buzzed, Grandma tapped her spoon against her glass. The room grew still. Everyone knew when she spoke, it meant something important. She cleared her throat, her voice steady and commanding. "I have something to say," she began, her eyes sweeping the table. "For the past year, I set aside money every month to help Daniel. $96,000 in total. That money never reached him. It was taken by Martin and Clifford." The room fell silent. Forks froze in midair, and the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. My dad shifted in his chair, his face draining of color. Cliff clenched his jaw, glaring at the table. One of my aunts gasped loudly. "You mean they stole from their own son and brother?" Her voice was sharp with disbelief. Murmurs spread quickly, relatives turning their heads toward the two of them like they were strangers. Dad tried to speak, but Grandma cut him off. "Don't. You had every chance to do right. Instead, you used what was never yours." Her words were final, like a judge delivering a sentence. Some cousins pushed their chairs back, disgust clear on their faces. An uncle muttered something about shame as he stood and walked out, shaking his head. Even the younger kids seemed to sense the tension, staring wide-eyed at the adults. I sat frozen, heat rising in my cheeks. It was uncomfortable being the center of attention, but I couldn't deny the feeling building in my chest. For once, the truth wasn't hidden. Everyone knew what they had done, and there was no way for them to twist it. My dad hunched over, unable to look anyone in the eye. Cliff, on the other hand, looked like he might explode. His fists clenched tight, his face red with anger. He muttered under his breath, but no one was listening anymore. The room wasn't on their side. Grandma placed her hand gently on my shoulder, grounding me in the chaos. Daniel deserved better. From now on, he'll get what belongs to him directly. I will not allow this kind of betrayal in my family again. The announcement left the gathering divided. Some stayed quiet, others left, but the damage was done. I stared at my plate, my appetite gone, but inside there was a strange calm. It wasn't joy, not even relief. It was justice. Their secrets were finally dragged into the light, and for once, I didn't have to carry the weight alone. The months that followed felt like stepping into a different life. For the first time, money started coming directly into my account, steady, reliable, and mine. The weight that had pressed on my shoulders for years began to lift. I gave my notice at the diner, leaving behind the late nights and endless double shifts. No more dragging myself home at dawn smelling of grease and coffee. With the financial stress gone, I had space to think clearly. Graduate school, something I once thought was impossible, suddenly felt real. I started visiting campuses, speaking with advisors, and sketching plans for a future I could shape on my own terms. For the first time, the path ahead wasn't blocked by someone else's choices. My father and brother were nowhere in that picture. They tried calling in the beginning, leaving angry voicemails filled with blame and excuses, but I stopped listening. I couldn't open the door for people who had proven they'd shut it in my face without hesitation. News trickled back to me, missed mortgage payments, failed ventures, creditors calling. They were living in the storm they created, and I had no desire to step into it. Sometimes late at night, the betrayal still stung. Knowing the people who should have lifted me up instead tried to hold me down left scars I couldn't hide. But I also carried something stronger, my grandmother's belief in me. She hadn't just given me money. She gave me the chance to rebuild, the kind of second chance not everyone gets. I didn't feel forgiveness in my heart for Martin or Cliff. Maybe one day that would come, or maybe not. But I learned that I didn't need their apologies to move forward. My life was no longer defined by their greed. As I sat at my desk, acceptance letters spread before me, I realized something simple yet powerful. The best revenge wasn't anger, shouting, or even justice served at family gatherings. The best revenge was living a life they could no longer control, a life they couldn't touch. And that's exactly what I intended to do. I often think about whether I made the right choice by cutting my dad and brother out of my life, or if I should have tried one more time to fix things. What do you think? Was I right to walk away, or should I have given them another chance? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear them. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.